Hello, everyone. We're going to get started now. It's about 4:02, and I see that a lot of people have come on. So I just wanted to welcome everyone. I am Babette Henderson. I am the Senior Director of Alumni Engagement at the Feinberg School of Medicine. And this is our virtual event called That Was Then, This Is Now, the Evolution of the Medical Campus. This webinar was one of our most popular forums at Alumni Weekend, so we're excited to bring this event to you virtually this year. And I'm pleased to introduce our speaker, Dr. Eric Boberg. He's the Executive Director of Research and the Research Assistant Professor of Medicine in General Internal Medicine and Geriatrics at the Feinberg School of Medicine. Dr. Boberg will present his materials, and we will have time after the presentation to respond to the questions that have been submitted. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section, and we can address them as many as we can, time permitting. I want to turn it over to Dr. Boberg now.
All righty, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to do this. I need to start out with a few caveats and warnings. The first is, this is my first ever webinar. So this is really weird for me, just talking on my computer screen. And if I freak out because I'm not doing this live with an audience to respond to, my apologies, and I'll try and get back on track as soon as I can. The second is that because I am doing this from home, there's a chance at any moment that my cat or my dog may insist on attention, and I will try and keep the disruption to a minimum. But I walked the dog just before, so hopefully that's the worst of the challenges out of the way. So with that, I'll get started. I always like to begin this talk by reminding folks that once upon a time, what is now the medical campus was in the middle of Lake Michigan. Well, if not the middle, at least underwater. This slide shows the original shoreline of Lake Michigan, with the yellow X being where the Robert Lurie Medical Research Building is right now. So all of this area where the campus exists is landfill and a lot of debris from the Chicago fire, which has made for some interesting discoveries when we dig down for the basement of new buildings. The Chicago campus land was purchased in the early 1920s by a fellow by the name of Alexander McKinlock, and he donated it to the university in the early 1920s. And a very famous architect by the name of James Gamble Rogers was hired to do the design of the three original buildings, the Levi Mayer Law School, the Weebolt Hall, which was at that point School of Commerce, and the Montgomery Ward Medical and Dental Center. This plan shows Mr. Rogers' master plan for the campus. And it's worth noting that almost 100 years later, when we were planning our new building, the Simpson Quarry building, which I'll get to later, we went back to this original campus plan and included elements of it. So it is still an active part of our everyday life on the Chicago campus. So in 1927, the original three buildings, all designed by James Gamble Rogers, were opened. On the left, you'll see the Levi Mayer, home of the School of Law, the Weebolt building in the center with its original chimney, long since gone, and the Montgomery Ward building on the right, essentially unchanged on the outside, but vastly different on the inside than it was in 1927. Already in 1929, the very first of our hospital affiliates joined us on this part of the Chicago campus. That is the Passavant Hospital here on the left, which you can see in its original configuration from 1929, with the ward building here in the center, Wiebolt and Levy-Mayer. I love this picture from the 1930s because it not only shows the buildings of the Chicago campus, which we've already seen here in the center, but you can also see off to the left the old armory, which is now the site of the Museum of Contemporary Art. Off to the left here, we see a tall building, which would become the Lakeshore Center in the 1970s. We'll get to that in a bit. You see just a corner of the old Furniture Mart, then 666 North Lakeshore Drive, now 680 North Lakeshore Drive, and we'll come back to that a bit later. But what I love most about this slide are the vast tracts of vacant land, not even parking lot, just grass. And it's hard to imagine having that much vacant land in Chicago downtown here in the 2020s. In 1939, the university constructed its first residence hall here on the Chicago campus, Abbott Hall, just in time for it to be turned over to the Navy for World War II, where it was used for housing for naval trainees. It became a dormitory after the war in the 1940s. In 1941, the second of our hospital affiliates came to campus. That's the whitish building here, Wesley Memorial Hospital, starting to give us the sense of a campus and a quad here with Ward, Wiebolt, Levy-Mayer. And down here in the corner, you can also see Thorne Auditorium, which was a major part of the campus at that time. In the background, the Palmolive building is the only skyscraper of comparable height in this part of campus. No sign of the Water Tower Place or the Hancock Tower yet to come long in the future. Here again, from 1941, you get a better view of what the original configuration of the Wesley Hospital looked like with its star-shaped design. Passavant ward, Abbott here adjacent to the old Furniture Mart. You can also see up here in center top the CBS studios, which we'll come back to later and are now part of our campus. And again, the armory down here on the bottom. And then this area here is what is now the Lakeshore Park. But again, still lots of surface parking, lots of vacant land, and low-rise buildings. So in World War II, or after World War II, Northwestern University leadership worked with our hospitals to develop a plan to create a major academic medical center or medical city here on the Chicago campus, which was quite a huge and ambitious plan. This is the original conceptual design of the campus. The darker buildings here are all existing, Ward, Wesley, Abbott, the Lakeshore Center. And these lighter buildings are sort of architectural placeholders for where they foresaw future clinical or research buildings to be put up. And it's worth noting that while the buildings ultimately constructed looked a lot different than this, much of this plan really has come to fruition over the course of the years. I'm not sure how long they thought it would take to get this big. It's taken us about 70 years, but we've surely gotten there. By 1955, the next research building was added to the Chicago campus, attached to the Ward building. Here you'll see the Morton Medical Research Building. Also, we've added the Lakeside VA Hospital over here on the left. And that was part of the broad expansion of VA facilities in the post-war years. Again, we still see lots of vacant land along with other buildings, Thorne here, Lakeshore Center here off to the right. So by 1958, we start to see further expansion. In the white here in the very center, you'll see the East Wing expansion of Passavant Hospital. You'll also see the first of the multi-level parking ramps on what was at that time city land. And here we still on university land had a flat surface parking lot and more parking over here to the east. So we continue to grow. Also here in the center left, you'll see an expansion onto Wesley Hospital beyond the original cross-shaped design. By 1965, we're continuing to expand. Here you'll see the west wing of Passavant Hospital under construction, as well as the third of the medical research buildings. This here, tall building here is the Searle Medical Research Building, built in the 1960s with a generous donation from the Searle folks. Again, we still have the law school here. Here we can now see right where I've got the arrow pointing, the McCormick building, part of the law school. We still have Thorne Auditorium, and you can see bits here of Levy Mayer. Weebolt is pretty much obscured by the other buildings. So in 1969, this is what you would have seen from the lake if you were flying by the campus. You'll see in the center here the large bulk of Passavant Hospital, the Searle building, the Ward building, Weebolt along here, Abbott Hall here, Lakeside VA. And here where I've got the arrow pointing is another building which enters the picture of the campus history, and that's the Galter Carriage House. And these are fascinating pictures from the 1960s, which give an idea that the Galter Carriage House was apparently quite a happening spot at that time with a pool and lots of folks having lots of fun. By the time I joined Northwestern in 2002, the Galter Carriage House had seen better days. It still had a famous steakhouse on the first floor, but was housing primarily residents and fellows, folks of that nature, and it didn't have quite the pizzazz that these pictures would suggest. All right, by 1971, you can see here we've got the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago, the third of our affiliated hospitals to come to campus. And it's under construction right here in 1971. You can see cranes here with a residential skyscraper. Excuse me, the Allerton Hotel here with a little bit of the Tip Top Tap sign, which still exists, you can see. But we still have this large expanse of greatly underutilized real estate right here in the center of the operation. So by 1973, the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago was fully completed and occupied. And you can begin to see here, between Passavant and RIC, the beginnings of the famous cloverleaf shape of Prentice Women's Hospital, designed by the renowned architect Bertrand Goldberg. And let me see, I don't think there's anything else new on this slide. Again, we still have Thorne, Lakeside VA, the Armory, and other buildings. In 1977, the university purchased the Lake Shore Center. This building had originally been built in 1927, but the university purchased it in 1977 as additional housing beyond what was available in Abbott Hall for the increasing size of the medical school and law school classes, as well as housing for residents and fellows. So by 1977, you can see Prentice here in its original configuration. And we've started to go up in terms of parking, up off surface parking lots. The city lots are, I'm sorry, yes, the city lots are still here. And this is a, and I'll forget, admit, I forget if this was a university or a hospital lot. But it was growing up to manage the large numbers of additional folks coming to campus. So by 1979, you can see here in the very center, the Health Sciences building. This is the only building I know of that actually has 3 names. The entire structure is referred to as the Health Sciences building. The university portions are referred to as the McGaw Pavilion. The Northwestern Memorial Hospital portions are referred to as the Olson Pavilion. It's a shared building, approximately 50% owned by each of the 2 entities. And while it won some architectural awards in its time, it has proved to be a challenging building to operate, being co-owned and having 2 sets of infrastructure and 2 sets of facilities people trying to maintain that infrastructure. It's definitely been an interesting exercise over the years. The development of this building was part of a very complicated land swap that I really don't know all the details to, but was negotiated with the mayor and the president of the university, such that the university obtained this parcel of land here with the parking ramp and the Olson McGaw. The city obtained this parcel of land, or the hospital obtained this parcel of land, excuse me. And it's very complicated. Maybe there's someone on the call who understands it all. But I know that it's been described as quintessential Chicago politics. Any of you folks on the line who were around in the 1980s will recognize this view, where everything in this part of campus was dominated by these bridges, which connected what was now Northwestern Memorial Hospital after the merger of the Wesley and the Passavant hospitals. There are 3 main buildings. Passavant would be off to the left here. The Health Sciences building, Olson McGaw Pavilions in the center, and then Wesley Hospital, former Wesley Hospital or Wesley Pavilion off to the right here, with some lovely 1980s vehicles dominating the middle. But you do see some of the attending physicians here in their gray coats not using the bridges, but crossing at street level. By 1983, the original Thorne Auditorium had outlived its lifespan, and the university constructed the Arthur Rubloff building, utilizing the entire site that Thorne used to be on. This building was originally occupied primarily by the American Bar Association, as well as housing the law library and a new version of the Thorne Auditorium. Over the years, the American Bar Association outgrew the size of this building. They left for larger pastures. I won't say they were greener, but they were larger. The medical school now occupies the top 4 floors of the building. And the only remaining non-university activity in the building is the American Bar Foundation, which occupies the 5th floor and has extensive dealings with the law school. Building still does house the law library, the Thorne Auditorium, and some other university functions. So in 1989, the university and Northwestern Memorial Hospital made a very controversial decision to add a floor to the building that housed both the Prentice Women's Hospital and the Stone Institute of Psychiatry, which was here in the base portion of the building. When the university was looking to redevelop this site after NMH moved to a new Prentice Women's Hospital, there was a story going around that Bertrand Goldberg considered that this addition of a floor completely ruined his masterpiece, and so he disowned the structure. We would have loved to have found documentation of that story when we were working with architectural preservation folks and the city to take down this building. Unfortunately, we could never find documentation. If any of you know of that, we would love to hear about it, although it is a bit moot at this point since the redevelopment has been completed. But you can see that you lose some of these lovely arches and the the air handling units and other features with the addition of the 5th floor of the base of the building. In 1990, the university added the 4th of the medical research buildings, the Terry Research and Education Building. This was designed in the academic Gothic style to reflect the adjacent buildings of Ward and Morton and the 2 hospitals. It was designed by a young architect by the name of Ralph Johnson, who you will hear a little bit more about later. So all 4 of these buildings, the Ward, Morton, Searle, and Terry, were connected at the lower levels, giving one large, roughly 500,000 square foot complex where medical research would occupied as the medical school continued to grow its research portfolio through the 1990s. So in the 1990s, Northwestern Memorial Hospital came to the conclusion that the Prentice and Wesley pavilions, as beautiful as they were from the outside, had reached the end of their useful lifespans. Difficult decisions, but they were necessary ones in order to provide world-class care that NMH was becoming known for. And so they decided to tear down that, that large parking structure and build the Feinberg and Galter pavilions, brand new pavilions for the hospital. Feinberg on the left being the inpatient facility, Galter on the right being the outpatient facility, connected across the street to expanded parking garages owned by the university to take up the slack for the parking structure that, that was torn down. It's hard to believe that these buildings are now over 20 years old. They continue to be expanded. NMH is just adding additional hospital inpatient floors on the 11th and 12th floors, connecting these two pavilions. In 2004, on the site of the former Passivant Hospital, the university constructed its fifth research building, the Robert H. Lurie Medical Research Building. It again has, although it's in a far more contemporary style, still has the contemporary limestone exterior and some of these homages to flying buttresses of academic Gothic architecture. In 2007, on the former site of the Wesley Pavilion, Wesley Hospital, NMH constructed the new Prentice Women's Hospital. They had determined in the early 2000s that the Bertrand Goldberg Prentice Women's Hospital was not going to meet their needs long term. That they needed to increase capacity beyond what that structure could accommodate. And so they redeveloped the Wesley site for a greatly expanded Prentice Women's Hospital, which has not only the obstetrics and gynecology, but has a large outpost of the Robert Lurie Comprehensive Cancer Center, and other aspects of women's health housed in that beautiful new building. In 2012, the last of our major hospital affiliates, what was formerly known as Children's Memorial Hospital, came to campus and built its new building on the site of the former Galter Carriage House. You know, during the early 2000s, Children's Memorial had also outgrown their space on their Lincoln Park campus. And their board and organization had a spirited debate about where we're to move. They were landlocked in Lincoln Park. They could not expand there any further. And there were numerous sites considered, the two of which got the most discussion were this site downtown, incorporating themselves and becoming a part of the overall Northwestern Academic Medical Center, and another site out by the west side where UIC, Cook County Hospital, and the Illinois Medical District are. And it was a tough choice for them. The site on the west side was a lot less expensive to build on. Perhaps some easier access for their patients and their patients' families. But ultimately, they decided that integration of both their clinical facilities and their research activities with Northwestern University and the adjacent Prentice Women's Hospital gave them the opportunity they needed to continue to be an eminent children's hospital and allow them to grow and you know, continue their mission of clinical and research excellence. So they have joined us on the campus. Outside of this hospital itself, they have leased a lot of space in the neighborhood. They bought the old Archdiocese of Chicago building on Fairbanks and have really integrated beautifully with the rest of the academic medical center. You can also see in this picture the Museum of Contemporary Art, which replaced the old Armory building. I forget exactly when. It was before 2002 when I came to campus, but that is an adjacent but valued part of our campus, at least in part because there is an agreement with the city that this Lakeshore Park will not be sold or developed. And so we will have continue to have green space on the campus, and the museum will continue to have a beautiful lake view. I had forgotten to mention that in the mid-2000s, there was another change involving the Lakeside VA Hospital. With the declining population of veterans in the 2000s, the VA had a difficult decision to make over where they were going to consolidate their operations. They eventually decided to consolidate all of the inpatient and many of the outpatient clinics on the west side, at the West Side VA Hospital, now the Jesse Brown VA Medical Center. And they tore down the former Lakeside VA Hospital. That land was purchased by NMH for future development. And until such time as they choose to develop that site, it is now a lovely green meadow that we love having on campus. You can see in the background center a second university-owned parking garage. Our two parking garages, one adjacent to the Health Sciences building, and here adjacent to the VA site, provide the university and the medical school in particular with valuable resources from the parking revenue that they generate. You'll also see in the background development of an additional pavilion of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, the Lavin Pavilion. This consolidates a lot of the NMH outpatient clinics in a building that provides one-stop shopping for their outpatients. There is radiology available in the building. There is parking in the building. There's pharmacy available. So many of their patients can go there and do all their business without going outside. In fact, I visited the ophthalmology clinic on the 15th floor just yesterday to get my head, or at least my eyes, examined. Here is the completed Lavin Pavilion. As I said, it's got a number of NMH outpatient clinics. Orthopedic surgery is in this building in addition to ophthalmology. I forget all of the others, but it is also a beautiful addition to the campus, as well as our lovely parking garages. So in 2017, the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago, which has been the #1 rated rehabilitation hospital in the country for over 20 years, needed to expand beyond what its original building could accommodate. So they purchased the CBS Studios lot and built their new building, rebranding themselves as the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, or Ability Institute. And so this 1 million square foot structure now has wonderfully integrated research and education and clinical facilities in open formats, which allow their patients to continue to get the absolute best in rehabilitation, with both the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation, as well as the Department of Physical Therapy and Human Movement Sciences, both departments of the medical school. Finally, the most recent addition to the campus is the Simpson Biomedical Research Center, opened in April of 2019 on the site of the former Prentice Women's Hospital. This building was a challenge for many, many reasons, and occupied my professional life for the better part of 7 years. It was on the site of an iconic, historically significant architectural building, the Prentice Women's Hospital. And when the university reacquired that, that land and the building from Northwestern Memorial Hospital, they did a very thorough engineering study to determine if that building could be saved and reutilized. And at the end of the day, realized that it was built for the sole purpose of being a hospital and could not accommodate the needs of 21st century biomedical research, and thus needed to be torn down and replaced. Now, whatever one thinks of the architectural merits of the building, it is considered to be a classic of the brutalist design and the first of the cloverleaf design of hospitals, which have been copied across the country. And so the many architecture lovers and preservationists wanted to keep that building and fought the university for a couple of years. But eventually the city agreed with the university that it could not be saved and repurposed, and that the promise of 2,500 permanent high-paying medical research jobs made more sense than what was by then, unfortunately, a rotting hulk of a building. So that building did come down, and to maximize the efficient use of the site, we engaged, we had a world class architectural design competition. We invited premier architects from all over the world, including names many of you would recognize. Of those firms, we shortlisted 8 that we interviewed, and then for 6 months worked with 3 of them to develop the plan for the building, which allowed us not only to see who had the best ideas, but also see who we wanted to spend 5 years locked in a room with as we went through construction. At the end of the day, that firm was Perkins & Will, a Chicago-based firm that everyone from the city to the neighborhood association to the university all agreed had the best design. That was a design by Ralph Johnson, who did the Terry building in the mid-1980s. So he has nicely bookended his career with 2 very different structures on our campus. And so this building abuts up against both the Lurie Research Building to its west and at least the basement of the Rehabilitation Institute to the east. And so we had to dig a hole 40 foot deep right up against 2 occupied buildings, a medical research building and a functioning hospital. And that provided us with all kinds of fascinating challenges, but in the end, we were able to do it. The 600,000 square foot gorgeous glass facade building opened in April of 2019. And it accommodates not only research of the medical school, but research from the university. One floor is occupied by School of Engineering and other folks from the Evanston campus who collaborate extensively with the medical school, the medical center. But our friends at Lurie Children's Hospital actually purchased 4 floors of this building, 4 of the 9 laboratory floors, for their medical research operation, which allowed them to bring to the Chicago campus all of their medical research, which had been isolated up in Lincoln Park since the hospital moved down here. So we now have a truly integrated operation of our pediatric research, our developmental biology, our neuroscience, lots of different fields occupy the floors of this building, which literally now is the center of gravity of the campus, and allows us to connect all of our buildings from Ward all the way to Lavin and to Lurie Children's Hospital via bridges and tunnels, so that we do have a truly integrated medical center. This view of the Simpson Quarry building from the south shows you how well and how fully that we filled that site with each floor, each laboratory floor connected to the Lurie building to the west. They are connected so that we have a huge footprint. And then we're close to, but not right up against, the former Rehabilitation Institute Hospital to the east. Now, in addition to all of these buildings that the medical school and our hospital partners own, NMH has purchased some additional buildings for a variety of uses. Worcester House, some of you may know, it is primarily used for housing for fellows, short-term transitional housing for folks coming to campus. The Arcus Pavilion, formerly 676 North St. Clair, houses a lot of outpatient clinics. Dermatology, for example, is one major occupant of that building. Lurie Research Center has space in there. University and the medical school occupy some space, and a lot of the clinical offices, or the offices of clinical faculty, are in that building, which is now connected at the second floor by a bridge. And then 211 East Ontario houses a variety of administrative functions as well as VA outpatient clinics. And that is the only remaining outpost of the VA on the Northwestern Medical Center's Chicago campus. So in addition to all of that owned space, we lease a lot of space. And this takes advantage of our location in downtown Chicago and a nearly infinite supply of office space adjacent to the campus. And so we have leased space in these buildings for a variety of uses. We do in them what we call dry lab research or office-based research, like epidemiology and health services research. We've moved all of the administrative offices that we could out of our laboratory buildings and into these office buildings. This really allows us, with less capital, to lease space and expand more rapidly those types of research that can occur in regular office buildings. And so we have really a ton of research in public health, epidemiology, medical social sciences, health services research in the surrounding neighborhood. So where do we go from here in terms of future potential developments on campus? Well, that Terry building, which was new in 1990, is now 30 years old. And we are looking at the possibility of renovating those floors, not taking down the building, but gut renovating each floor one by one to make them more efficient, more attractive, and better suited to 21st century medical research. The Simpson Query building was designed to add an additional 16 lab floors to go up to 30 stories altogether, 600 feet, to allow a vertical expansion in the occupied space. Those of you in Chicago may know the Blue Cross Blue Shield building is famous for doing this, where we will minimally disrupt the activities and occupants of the lower floors while we expand upwards. That has already been designed. The architectural infrastructure is in place, from extra-sized columns and caissons to future elevator shafts to allow us to build up at some point in the future, doubling the size of the building from 600,000 square feet to 1.2 million square feet. We also, university now owns what we call 345 East Superior Street. It is also referred to as the old RIC building, but we're trying to be good and use the street address. And that is an additional potential site for development somewhere down the road when we outgrow the space that we continue to grow into. So I like to end the talk before we get to the Q&A portion by showing you some of the before and after shots of buildings that have come and gone through the years. So here, for example, you can see the Wesley Hospital on the left, and the new building on that site, Prentice Women's Hospital. Passavant Hospital on the left, and the Lurie Medical Research Building on the right. Thorne Auditorium, now the site of the Arthur Rubloff Building. The Galter Carriage House, now the site of Lurie Children's Hospital. The two red brick buildings at 259 East Erie Street that were taken down for the Lavin Family Pavilion of Northwestern Memorial Hospital. The CBS Studios, now the site of the Shirley Ryan Ability Labs. The old Prentice Women's Hospital, or the original Prentice Women's Hospital, versus the Simpson Query Biomedical Research Center. This rendering shows what the future tower will look like when we build out that additional structure at some point in the future, and it will be a huge addition to the skyline of this part of the city. I couldn't find two pictures that exactly show the campus over how it's changed over the years, but on the left is the picture I showed you earlier of the campus in the 1960s. And the right, courtesy of Google Earth, is what the campus looks like now, with all of the new buildings, all of the infill. And you can even see some interesting features on the top of Simpson Query and Lavin here, where there's actually green space on the top of the buildings, which helps reduce global warming, helps with our environmental efficiencies and making our buildings as environmentally friendly as they possibly can be. So now I think we get to the question and answer portion of things.
That's correct. Thank you so much, Dr. Boberg. That was a fabulous presentation. And I will be posing some of these questions to you. We might run a few minutes late, but I think it's important to try to get to some of the questions because we have a few of them.
Wow, I blathered for 50 minutes without hardly taking a breath. That's impressive.
That was a great presentation. The first question is, are there any new LEED certified buildings?
Yes. The Simpson Biomedical Research Center, we are pleased and proud, is the first LEED Gold building on the Chicago campus. We spent a lot of time and effort and not a small amount of money doing things that make it much more energy efficient. It is, believe it or not, 1/3 more energy efficient per square foot than the Lurie Research Building, which is only 15 years old. So we do lots of things like heat recovery and green roofs. That is our first LEED certified building.
Great. The next question is, years ago, I heard that Northwestern University owned the land under Water Tower Place and was collecting big rent. Is this true?
Not to my knowledge. The only land that I am aware the university has sold or swapped had to do with that large exchange. So that NMH ended up with the Galter and Feinberg pavilions. The university owns the land where the health sciences building and the parking ramp are. We did sell the land and the building where the Lakeshore Center is. That was sold in the early 2000s and is now a retirement community. So sort of going from student housing to the other end of the age spectrum, one might say. But that's the only land I'm aware of. I am still a relative newbie at 18 years affiliation. So I can't speak definitively, but I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. We had sort of two questions on the VA hospital space. Why can't the land that was the VA hospital be used as a park until needed? It's beautiful, but it's a waste of space now. And then also the other question was, what is the plan for the future development of the meadow, formerly the VA?
Sure. You know, in the spirit of true transparency, the main reason we can't put anything there, or to be more accurate, Northwestern Memorial Hospital can't put anything there, has to do with the fact that once you put something there, it becomes almost impossible to take it away. So when they decide that they need to redevelop that parcel, which was originally intended to be inpatient, additional inpatient beds, if there's a park there, if there's a daycare center there, even if there's a parking lot there, our very active and involved neighborhood friends will object vociferously. Because you know, once you give something, it becomes permanent in the space world and very hard to take away. So that's really the reason for that. You know, after the hospital purchased that land and the Affordable Care Act became the law of the land a decade or so ago, there was an evolution away from inpatient to more outpatient care. And so the immediate need for more inpatient facilities was deferred, which is why the hospital then went and developed a different parcel for the Lavin family outpatient pavilion. And they retain in their back pockets this lovely meadow for future development. because it has such a large footprint, it is best suited for inpatient development or something that specifically needs that, that big ability to put so much stuff on one floor. So that's why they're holding it in their back pocket.
Great, thank you. Will you mention the joining together of Passavant and Wesley hospitals in 1970 to form Northwestern Memorial Hospital?
You know, I can mention it, but I don't know a lot of the details. They were originally two independent hospital affiliates of Northwestern Memorial. As we noted in the slides, Passavant came to campus in the 20s, Wesley in the 40s. And all I really know is that in the 70s, it became apparent that one bigger hospital was better than two smaller ones. That there was overlap and competition that could best be served by having one larger institution. A trend which continues to this day as Northwestern Memorial Hospital continues to buy both inpatient and outpatient facilities throughout the region, moving from a downtown-centric model to really a regional powerhouse.
Are the first 2 years of medical school still in the Searle building, and did the library?
So the Galter Health Sciences Library, we just concluded an $8 million renovation of that facility, which occupies the first and second floors of both the Searle and Ward buildings. And that was an interesting and challenging process because libraries have changed dramatically in this digitized era. And many of us mourn the fact that almost all of our stacks are gone. The books have all been digitized. They have been donated or put into reserves, but they are no longer needed on a day-to-day basis. And so obviously the historic collections are maintained, but books we have that everybody else has, we no longer maintain downtown. And that space has now been reconfigured for medical education and study space. And the med students spread their time in the first 2 years across several buildings. They have first year medical students have their main lectures in the Lurie Research Building and the Hughes Auditorium, or at least they did pre-COVID. Now all of those large lectures are virtual. The second year students have their main lectures in the McGaw portion of the Health Sciences Building in the Daniel Hale Williams Auditorium. There are also another expansion of our facilities were the addition of highly interactive classrooms for team-based learning, also in the McGaw Pavilion, a project we just finished just in time to not be able to do that in the pandemic times. But those facilities are there when we need them.
The other question is, it's a huge campus, where do employees park?
So some of them use the university-owned lots. Some of them use hospital-owned lots. But the university and the school are extremely supportive of alternate means of transportation. And so only about a third of the university folks drive to campus. 2/3 use public transportation of one kind or another. Believe me, whenever we expand, there is a long conversation with the city about parking and making sure that we can manage the traffic and that there are enough parking spaces. It frankly is the hospital which consumes a larger number of the parking spaces in the area because they have such a higher turnover, and their faculty and staff are often have to come in emergent situations. So, university folks have regular schedules and they can rely on public transportation. The hospital folks, not always so much.
We're going to stand for just a few more minutes to try to get through the rest of these questions quickly. How will the advent and increase in telemedicine affect the need for traditional office space, especially during the COVID pandemic?
Well, that is the probably $64 million question these days. It is something that is under intense, sometimes heated debate, not only at Northwestern, but at medical schools across the country. My cop-out answer is we really don't know yet. We see the opportunity to do more and more work virtually, both administrative work as well as clinical work, allowing us to not have to pay for expensive offices that then sit vacant. However, we still have a lot of folks with traditional mindsets who feel that their own office is their right and their privilege, and are not yet ready to give that up. So it's going to evolve. We are hoping to use this crisis as a stimulus to making those conversations more productive and more urgent, because we do continue to grow. And we would like to continue to grow in the most efficient manner possible. And that may mean reconfiguring spaces and uses of space rather than taking on more office space.
There's a couple questions on Abbott Hall, so I'll try to condense them. Any plans to replace it? Are students still living there? What's the current status of Abbott Hall?
So a handful of years ago, the last of the student floors were closed down. Over time, the students just became much more efficient at housing than the university could provide. So when I arrived, the top 4 floors of Abbott were still student housing, primarily international students, but that closed, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. So now Abbott Hall is filled with a variety of medical school and other university functions, some administrative and some research. There are no immediate plans to take down that building. It is a challenging building from a planning and design perspective. It doesn't have any air conditioning systems. It's got radiator heat and window air conditioners. The floor to floor height is very small. It's hard to develop efficiently and attractively, but we are doing our best. The main constraint that we worry about is one of the main hubs of the world internet is beneath that building. And so any interruption of service would be very unpopular. So we have to be very careful about redeveloping that building, although it probably makes sense in a long-term time frame.
And is there talk of the Abbott Hall Theater opening as well?
So there is a theater that has been built out for the School of Communications, but it is not a theater that has public seating. It is essentially a space where folks who do theater production will learn how to do theater production, but it doesn't have a lot of seats. So it is essentially their form of classroom for theater design and management.
Okay, and then just a couple more questions we've got. I'm glad that you finally mentioned the old RIC before 1971. What about the dental school?
So the university, which really wanted and was committed to expanding the medical school, felt in the late 90s that it could no longer support both a medical and a dental school. And they made the difficult decision to close the dental school. The last students, I believe, graduated around 2000, 2001, right about the time I came to campus. And all of the dental school space has been redeveloped for the medical school. For example, there was an auditorium and ward that is now labs. The space in the Lavin Pavilion is a variety of functions now, including laboratories. A lot of medical education space is now in that building, as well as some medical administration.
And another question on the weight of the buildings on the sand of Lake Michigan. Any comments on that?
So fortunately, we down under the sand, eventually one gets to bedrock. And the design of all of these buildings takes that into account in ways that, because I am not a structural engineer, I cannot begin to explain. But I know we spent millions and millions of dollars on the foundation, sinking caissons 150 feet down into that soft soil to make sure that those buildings would never shift. And the ward building has not shifted in 100 years. And our structural engineers promise that even if we build up to 600 feet on Simpson Quarry, that building will stay solid for as long as any of us can imagine. Okay.
Do you know the net worth of all these properties?
I do not.
Okay.
I will say, so to give you an idea, I think I can say this publicly, but the overall construction cost of the Simpson Quarry Biomedical Research Center, as it stands now, is right around $500 million. So, and that is 600,000 square feet out of several million square feet between the hospitals and the university. So, a lot.
Okay, great. Another question on what happened to the psychiatry department, which had been intertwined with Prentice.
Yeah, so they have moved their inpatient facilities into the Galter Pavilion, 11th and 12th floors of 11, 12, 9 and 10, excuse me, 9 and 10 of the Galter Pavilion. A lot of their outpatient is in leased space in one of the buildings I didn't really speak to, but it's called the Enteree building. But those outpatient facilities will be moving to the Arcus building sometime next year. And so they will have been integrated into other NMH facilities.
Great. Just 3 more questions and then we'll let you go. How did NU finance all this development? It clearly is worth a few $1 billion.
As with all of these things, it's a variety of sources. Our hospital partners have been incredibly generous over the years in contributing to our buildings. Both Northwestern Memorial Hospital and what is now the Lurie Children's Hospital. There is a wonderful philanthropy. All of our buildings are named after generous benefactors. And I won't even get started naming them because I'll leave off important people and the development people will hit me. But we could not do it without their efforts and tremendous philanthropy from all kinds of donors. We also use, we sell bonds. So there's debt funding. There is funding out of the university endowments. So It's a mishmash, and I am thankful every day that I can say repeatedly, my job is not to make money, it is to spend money. And so they tell me how much I can spend, and we manage to spend it all.
Great, thank you. Two last questions. Are there any remaining student dorms on campus?
No.
Okay. And the last question was, when I was a student in the early 80s, surgeries were performed in the Lavin Pavilion. Is that still the case?
No, all of the same-day surgery is now in the Lavin Pavilion.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Dr. Boberg. Thank you to everyone who participated, who asked questions. There's a handful of questions that we weren't able to get to that I will email the people individually to answer their questions, and feel free to reach out to me as well if anything comes up after the presentation. But thank you all for joining us, and have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.